everyone, it's Erin Hines with Gas and Natural Classroom. This week will just be a short video to finish up our series on Spencer Mountain. Last week we dug deep into the geology. I'm still finding flour on top of my fridge. And I didn't have time to include some of the information I uncovered with Tim on the, shall we say, the human history of the mountain. So to recap, those questions were who named it Spencer and what happened to the town of Spencer Mountain. When I was poking around on GIS, I found a marker labeled gravesite for Zachariah Spencer, and it was kind of located at the base of the mountain. I figured if you're important enough to get your grave marked on a county map, then maybe you're pretty important in general. So I asked Tim, because in addition to being an amateur geologist, he's also a local historian.
He is the person the mountain's named for. From what I've read, he came here around 1770, 1772 from Baltimore, Maryland. Mm-hmm. His father immigrated from Germany, like a lot of people did. So he came down here and bought a fairly large tract of land, a couple hundred of acres of land at the base on the other side of the mountain along the river, South Fork River. And he was like 40 years old when he came here, and he only lived to be 57. Wow. So he wasn't here very long, but he is the person, I think it was called maybe Boyle's Mountain before that, but it became named after him when he basically settled the area.
Right.
And of course you've probably heard that there's a story that when he came here, of course in the 1770s, we were still under English rule right before the Revolutionary War. So he apparently was a loyalist. He was loyal to the crown, and the locals were opposed to that. So as I understand it, if he wanted to live at all or comfortably, he needed to change his loyalties to become patriot, and he did. And so he ended up, I think, in having 12 children here in the area on the side of the mountain.
Then I did some Googling, I poked around on our Gaston County Library website, I checked out a book on Gaston County history from our local museum, and I pretty much pieced together the history of the town of Spencer Mountain. It pretty much comes down to our history of textile production in this county. The town was located at the base of the mountain, right beside the South Fork River. The river, not the mountain, was why the town was built. In 1874, a water-powered cotton mill was constructed, and I'm not sure, but I think the remains of this mill can be seen from the river. That stretch of river is protected by the Catawba Lands Conservancy, and you can get permission from them to put in a canoe or a kayak below the dam that's there now. But anyway, the town came up around that business. After changing hands a few times, that business was purchased in 1957 by Far Yarns, and Spencer Mountain was a typical mill town as far as I understand. That means the houses and businesses were owned by the mill for the most part and were provided for the mill workers. If you know anything about the textile business in North Carolina, you probably already know where this is going. Textile manufacturing has shifted overseas in the past couple decades, and many of these mills and mill towns have just shut down. So that happened to the town of Spencer Mountain in 1999, and the town became unincorporated. So that's the conclusion of our investigation into Spencer Mountain. I hope you enjoyed it. And to get you outside this week, I want to encourage you to get to know the South Fork a little bit better. There's a section of the Carolina Thread Trail which it runs through the area that is conserved by the Catawba Lands Conservancy along that paddle trail that I mentioned. It's open to the public. It runs from McAdenville to Lowell, and there's parking at the McAdenville area. And it actually goes past a couple of mills, the ruins of an old bridge, and the history of that is explained a little bit more on the Catawba Thread Trail website, which I put a link to in the description below so you can read about that. But it is an old footpath that was used by American Indians as well as settlers as they were traveling back and forth to those cotton mills. So I encourage you to check that out with your families. Or if you are watching this and you aren't from this area, I challenge you to Find a landform that's local to your area and learn its history. I also want to emphasize that the history I was able to share here is obviously not the complete version of the human history of this mountain. Our area is at the boundary of what was Catawba and Cherokee American Indian territories. So no doubt these tribes had their own names and stories for this mountain. But due to war, disease, and cultural persecution brought by the European settlers, these histories have been lost. So as I try to acquaint or reacquaint myself with this land, that's something I always try to keep in mind, and I encourage you to do the same as you investigate your own landforms. Have a great week, and if you discover anything interesting, please do reach out. Email me at aaron.hines@gaston.gov.